friends, and welcome to another stupendous installment from very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Monday. Saturday marked the last of the Wyoming GOP county conventions, with the final one being held in Sheridan. I don't exactly know what it is with these things, but apparently we can't let one go by without just a little controversy. Of course, there's been several counties that have tried to censure my pal Rebecca for doing nothing wrong anyway, when in reality they all should have been censuring the Democrats and the redcoats that helped them. With the exception of Carbon County, and frankly, we just don't know what's happened to them, all of the rest of them failed. Evidently, most of the Wyoming GOP still remembers that due process is still a thing. But those resolutions, in fact, all of them, weren't brought by the people we would classify as the grassroots. And by that I mean the people that actually make all of the decisions in the Wyoming Republican Party. But all of those resolutions to try to sack our pal Rebecca were brought by party leadership. Now, I wouldn't want to mention any names, but people like Joey Correnti, Taylor Allred, and Kat Ruckert over in Teton County. In Ruckert's case, she conveniently wasn't actually the person that brought the resolution. However, she was the person that issued a statement not defending her state committeewoman, not defending Republican principles, and evidently ignoring everything in the party platform. Conveniently, she just got to be the messenger. Yeah, if you believe that, I've got a really nice piece of beachfront property over around Guernsey to sell you. Have your people call my people. We'll talk. But like I said, with the exception of Carbon County, all of those failed. And if you were to ask me why they ran the resolutions anyway, I think I would have to say that they had replaced whatever Republican part of their brain that they may have had before with the 2026 version of the Democrat-led Me Too movement. One of those resolutions, I wouldn't want to mention any names, Joey Correnti, actually called for representatives to resign because they hadn't denounced the actions of another representative and denounced them according to a flawed and not in possession of all the facts interpretation of what happened. If it sounds like a bunch of Republicans are acting like Democrats, that's because they are. When all of those resolutions failed, they shifted their focus from things that aren't actually a problem, like constitutionally protected free speech, ironically, and in a pendulum-esque fashion, all the way to the other side to attack the press. It's ironic because it's the press that helped all of these people call for the resignation and denouncement of their fellow Republicans. You see, establishment Republicans, of which all of these people I'm speaking about are nothing if not reactionary. Responding to the controversy of the moment. I mean, what else can you call it when you're relying on your delicate little feelers that have somehow been damaged and you've already checked your spine at the door? About the only thing that you can do is be reactionary. But it is not the press as an institution that these folks are attacking, rather the access of the press. Now, it could be that the press has outlived their usefulness for these redcoats and now pose a political threat to them, because the controversy of the moment has passed, and now the left-wing media in Wyoming will be salivating for the next perceived scandal. So while these folks used the press for their own purposes, now they're trying to hide from them. The first example came from the Teton County Republican Convention. The title of this bylaw change might even be more laughable than what's actually written in it. Let me give it to you. Audio-visual recording by law. Now, of course, whomever put this stupid thing together was referring to the Teton County Republican Party bylaws. But when they hyphenated the word bylaw, it completely changes the meaning. Now, of course, I don't have to explain the linguistic and grammatical humor to this astute audience. But when there's a screw-up this big, you gotta point it out. The rest of this ignorant bylaw change is just as ridiculous as the title, because apparently these ignorant souls in Teton County have forgotten about Wyoming Statute 73701 and 73702. Those are the ones that are really a threat to redcoats in the Republican Party, because they guarantee that Wyoming is a one-party recording state, which means you don't have to tell anybody that they're being recorded, so long as you, the one that's doing the recording, is there. And there's the little piece about Republican meetings being open meetings. You see, that's why you have to notice them in the paper so the public knows that they're happening and can attend. So not only is it wrong-headed, ignorant, and stupid, it's also against the law. Let me read you a couple of the opening paragraphs of this stupid thing. Quote, "The purpose of this bylaw, hyphenated, is to set forth expectations and limitations concerning the recording and photographing of TCRP meetings and participants. Except for a recording or photograph of a TCRP meeting made or taken by a properly credentialed representative of the press, no other recording, video, and audio or photograph shall be made or taken of such meeting by any person without, except with the permission of the chairperson and the relevant committee." Aha! And guess who would get to decide who is a properly credentialed member of the press? Well, the chairman, of course. And honestly, did you have any doubt about who would make that decision? Now, I know I'm referring to them as stupid, ignorant, and idiotic, which they are, but they are at least smart enough to understand that real journalism does not come from properly credentialed members of the press. Real journalism is more often done by independent people like me, which is the main reason why they attempted this stupid bylaw unhyphenated change, to prevent independent people from recording the dastardly things that they're planning. You see, my friends, as a party, we're in this weird spot where people who did have a good, solid conservative thing going on have realized that there are people that want to continue that. And it becomes an impediment to the things that these establishment type of people really want to get accomplished. You see, they thought that they could ride this wave of conservatism into the next election and probably the following one, and then they would be in power. And of course, at some point, they would disregard the real conservatives, and they would be the ones in control. But what they failed to realize is that once the conservative movement took hold in various parts of the state, the people that made it happen, the grassroots, people like you and me, are not willing to let their accomplishment go by the wayside and leave these establishment Republicans in power. And that's why you're getting these ridiculous bylaw changes, to try to cement the power that they've gained, the power that was brought to them by the grassroots. And just at a base level, if you're not doing anything wrong, if you're running the party, county, state, or otherwise, according to the party platform, you have absolutely nothing to hide from the press. In fact, you want them to report on what you're doing. It was not that long ago that I started Cowboy State Politics, and the number one thing that I heard is, thank God there's somebody on our side that's actually reporting on what we're doing. Somebody that is at least trying to beat back the establishment drive-by Wyoming media. Oh, but it's a very different thing now, my friends. Now, the truth becomes an impediment to what they're trying to do. Before, that is, before we had taken control of most of the county parties in the state, reporting the facts was a good thing. And now that the guns of transparency and truth are turned in their direction, well, now we have to have bylaws that prevent the public from knowing exactly what we're doing. But let's take it one step further, which is what happened in Sheridan County on Saturday. And we'll do that in just a second. But first, an absolutely outrageous profit timeout. Cowboy State Politics is brought to you by the Buffalo Wool Company. The weather seems to be warming up a little bit, but don't get too excited. It's still spring in Wyoming, and you know what that means. I suggest you be prepared with a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the coldest of Wyoming winter days, and they'll take care of your feet in the summer, too. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. Today's program is also brought to you by Morton Buildings. If you're in the market for any type of metal structure, whether it's a garage or a barn or maybe something bigger like a roping arena, the two guys you need to talk to are Marcos and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out at their website, mortonbuildings.com. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the program. That way you can be notified every single time there's a brand new episode of Cowboy State Politics. To do that, go to my website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. And now, back to the program. To the open range record. I've got to tell you, my friends, it's a heck of a lot of fun to be able to use articles from your own website. It's a lot of fun. Anyway, in an article entitled, Wyoming GOP Chair Attempts to Bar Members of the Press from Participation in Party, and I quote, Saturday, the Sheridan County Republican Party held its 2026 county convention. During debate on proposed changes to the organization's bylaws, a proposal to effectively bar from leadership positions any person who in any way works in the news or media was introduced. The proposal was titled Officer Incompatibility, and it contained this reference, quote, no person may serve as county chairman, vice chairman, state committee man, state committee woman, county secretary, county treasurer, or as chair of any standing or special committee of the county central committee who served as a member of the press defined as an employee, contractor, on-air talent, or regular contributor for any news outlet, broadcast station, newspaper, news website, or other organized media entity that reports on public affairs in Wyoming. End quote. Wow. Just wow, my friends. And by the way, before we get into this, and in case you haven't figured it out yet, there was no way I was going to take this load of crap sitting down. There's a little bit of Sheridan County inside baseball that you have to understand before you realize exactly what Bryan Miller was trying to do. And before I go any further, it absolutely was the Wyoming State GOP chairman that brought this bylaw change to our county convention. And here's how we know that. When this thing was flopped down on the table in front of me, I looked up at Todd Windsor, who was the chairman of the bylaws committee, which, by the way, this bylaw change, not hyphenated, never went through the bylaws committee. It was brand new the morning of the convention. But anyway, when he flopped it down on the table, I looked up at him and asked, who brought this? Where did this come from? And he replied, quote, I received this last night from the state, end quote. I can tell you for a fact that if this stupid thing had been brought before the bylaws committee, it absolutely would have been killed because we conservatives, that is, actual conservatives, had the majority on that committee. So Todd says he got this bylaw, unhyphenated change, from the state. When Bryan Miller, the state GOP chairman, was introducing it, he gave conflicting stories as to where it came from. The first reason he gave is, quote, this is part of a larger strategy to regain control of our primary elections. And then a little bit later, he said, this was given, quoting now, this was given to me by the parliamentarian, end quote. Now, we can be pretty sure that that last one is bullcrap because there's absolutely nothing in Robert's Rules of Order that would prevent anybody who works for a media company from being in any position in the party. So anyway, Miller is giving some conflicting stories, but here's actually what he said in the meeting so you can just hear it from his own mouth.
As we move into doing that, there are some rules that other states have put in place. 48 out of the 50 states already have rules in place regarding officers and how things, and officers, the press, and a bunch of other areas that they look at. As we get to the point that we're going to do this, we need to have in place some bylaws that talk about how officers and are participate in order to maintain public confidence. That's what these are designed to do. They are out there to ensure that the public looks at the party as a separate entity from the electeds themselves and from the press. That we're not an extension of those two organizations. Those organizations are an extension of us, the body. And that's the intent of these two articles. So if you have any direct questions, be my guest. I'll answer them. But that is where this is coming from. As we move to begin participating in our primaries.
Now, of course, if you're from Teton County, I'm sure that you're aghast right now that I recorded the meeting from Saturday. Every second of it, without hyphenating anything. Anyway, back to Sheridan County. After Bryan finished, I walked up to the microphone. Now, I didn't look over at Todd and Bryan, but I'm pretty sure, at least if they had any sense about them, they were quaking in their boots. But like I say, I don't know that for sure. Anyway, here is what I had to say. Now, I'm going to play the whole thing for you, and we're going to have to do a little bit of a stop and start, because Todd Windsor unwisely interrupts me. Here it is. Listen.
Oh boy, do I have a lot to say about this. First of all, David Iverson, Precinct 1-1. First, I'd like you to look at Section 3. And the very first words of Section 3 on this says, serves as a member. You don't serve as a member of the press. You are employed. That is your chosen occupation. So the intent in this subsection 3 is to try to force being a member of the press into the same category as being an elected official. That doesn't make any sense. Secondarily, we are the party that constantly screams about transparency. Transparency with fraud, transparency with government, what all of our politicians are doing. And yet here we are trying to muzzle the press. There is no reason whatsoever that if a person is employed by a newspaper or happens to run a podcast or happens to own another media company, I kind of fall into a couple of those, that you should be precluded from holding an office in the party. Third, when you look at Wyoming statutes, it's in Title 22, Chapter 4, it even says that you don't even have to be an elected precinct person to be an officer in the party. And yet here we are trying to say that your chosen occupation precludes you? That's ridiculous and it's contradictory. Fourth, if you approve this, we may as well take this document, which is the Wyoming Republican Party platform, and burn it. Let me explain. There are a couple of sections in here that this bylaw change is absolutely against. The first one is the 12th plank of the platform, which talks about a free market economy is the most compatible with the requirements of personal freedom, and that governments, public or otherwise, that's my insertion in there, should not press undue influence on your chosen profession. This rule is just as arbitrary as saying because you're the dog catcher, you can't be an officer in the party, or a plumber, or a carpenter. I mean, there's no reason in there except to muzzle people who happen to speak the truth. Now, we may not like what certain media outlets say about us. We may not like the phrasing, but the truth is that media outlets provide transparency, one of the very things that we constantly scream about. Let me give you another one. Plank 23. Freedom of speech is a fundamental right secured by the U.S. Constitution. Freedom of individuals to express his or her own beliefs, ideas, and opinions without fear of retaliation, censorship, or legal sanction. If we are to have a plank in our platform that talks about the freedom of speech, how could we possibly bar the press from participating in that process? Which, by the way, just so happens to be a chosen occupation.
Now, hold on just a second. First, no, I wasn't done yet. But it's at this point that Todd Windsor unwisely interrupts me. Of course, Todd is smart enough to see the writing on the wall, and he could see, just as well as I could, all of the heads that were nodding up and down with every point I made. But he had to do something, because any more of what I was giving him was going to spell complete doom for their bylaw unhyphenated change. But because he interrupted me, every single person in that room found out what the real reason behind this bylaw change was. Here's the rest of it.
David?
Yeah.
So let me just clarify something.
Mm-hmm.
Are you against the entire thing, or are you just
As I started out,
against the fact that there's the number 3 in there, which is preventing you personally from being an officer?
it has nothing to do with me personally from being an officer. It would, but I'm definitely against Section 3.
So are you against Section 3, or are you against the entire item?
Well, if you let me finish, Todd, I'm about to amend.
Well, I was going to ask you if you wanted to amend to remove Section 3, because it sounds like where you're going.
Yep, that's where I'm going, but let me finish my argument.
Okay.
Last, if you are a member of the State Central Committee, which this also deals with, you sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. So there is nothing precluding being a member of the press from being an officer in the county party, the state party, or otherwise. This is absolutely ridiculous. I therefore move to amend and strike Section 3.
Got it.
And here's the paper.
David,
We have a
you should
second.
also amend
I'll second.
8.9B, which lists.
Been moved and seconded that we strike Section 3 out of this change of the bylaws.
Yeah, he thought.
Yes, sir.
There's also a reference to the press in the next section in A and B.
Got it. So that would be part of your amendment. We would also strike the line, except engagement as member of the press as defined above. So it would just be a period after public office.
Yes.
As you heard, Todd slipped and told us the real reason behind this bylaw unhyphenated change. That it was to prevent certain and specific individuals from being involved in party leadership at any level. Now, here comes the Sheridan County Republican Party inside baseball part. In Sheridan County, there are 2 people that have been longtime critics of state GOP Chairman Bryan Miller, myself and another gentleman named Jim Schellinger. Mr. Schellinger has worked at Sheridan Media for a really long time. Sheridan Media is definitely not on our side of the political line. If you're running against a conservative, generally speaking, you're going to get plenty of free advertising from them. Interviews and articles on their website and those sorts of things. Now, as far as everything that I know about Mr. Schellinger is he's a really delightful fellow. Now, he and I don't agree on really a whole heck of a lot of things, but it is absolutely ridiculous to try to change the rules to prevent him from being a party officer. But that's the Sheridan County part of it. And if their bylaw unhyphenated change was successful in Sheridan County, there's no reason to assume that it wouldn't have been successful at the state level. Except, of course, it got defeated roundly. The truth is, when the vote came, it sounded a heck of a lot like 91 people against it and 2 for it, though it was a voice vote, so you really don't know exactly what the vote count was. The end of this is that it really is establishment-type Republicans that are trying to hold on to and maintain power at the expense of all else, up to and including changing the rules to prevent people with whom they disagree from gaining power. That's not a conservative way of doing business, my friends. That's how the Redcoats operate. And it's how Bryan Miller and Todd Windsor and any of their supporters do as well. But in the end, we defeated it, and Bryan Miller, the Wyoming State GOP chairman, is taking a pounding today for it. It's a good day to be a conservative and own a couple of media companies, my friends. Well, that'll about do it for today's installment of Monday Reload. Have a good week, and we'll talk again on Wednesday. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is the one and only Cowboy State Politics. Have a good afternoon, Bryan.